Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I expect we might still have a few folks wandering in. Welcome to the 2024 Jane Chambers winning celebration for Shadowland in Conversation. My name is Jen Scott Mobley. I'm the I'm gonna try, you can tell, but I'm breathless, I'm nervous, I'm excited. I'm the co-coordinator of the award along with Maya Roth. And we are super excited to tell you a little bit more about the award and the winners this year and the other honorees. And so we're going to start first talking a little bit more generally about the contest before we move into the conversation about Shadowland. And especially want to start with thank yous. Thank you to my cohort, Maya Roth and Megan Stahl, for all the help facilitating this contest. As most of you, or many of you know in this room, the Jane Chambers contest is just celebrated its 40th anniversary. It has been sponsored by, yes, by Women in Theater and ATHE, and sustained entirely by the sweat equity and the passion of the folks of our community who are trying to uplift particularly women's voices and the voices of non-binary, genderqueer writers and performers. We particularly honor plays or are looking for plays that have a feminist perspective, which we see very pluralistically, and again, excellent roles for women, genderqueer performers. This year, we had 450 submissions, and Shadowland rose from among them through 3 rounds of adjudication, with readers drawn from across the country, all self-identified feminists between the ages of 25 and 80, quite literally, in various aspects and perspectives of the field, from writers, directors, dramaturgs, and so forth. Thank you all for being here. I thank you to our esteemed panelists for being here. I want to start, before we move into Shadowland, by talking a little bit about the other honorees. This year, from that 350, 450. That's like a Freudian slip. I wish it was only 350 at certain points in February when I was trying to find readers. Please. We celebrated this year 2 runners-up and 3 honorable mentions in addition to our winner. We don't, every year we, through a commendation and conversation, we select these honorees. Sometimes we have 1 runner-up and 6 honorable mentions. It really it goes among the readers and sort of what rises to the top. We don't, the plays are read not with the checklist next to them, but truly with like a full response from readers about, and I see some readers in the room who I'm really grateful to, for what sifts to the top. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit about Erika. Erika is a Black radical leftist writer, cultural organizer, cultural memory worker, land steward, and farmer. She is the creator and inaugural resident of the Ntozake Shange Social Justice Playwriting Residency at the Public Theater in partnership with Barnard College and the Shange Trust. Erika is the independent steward of the Daughter's Table, a 14-acre regenerative organic farm, so cool, and herbiary on Bayou Petit Passé, rooted in a radical eco-womanist praxis. She is also the producing artistic director of the Alice Dunbar Nelson and Shirley Graham Du Bois Going to the River Festival. Her awards include the Penn Laura Peels International Foundation for Theater Award, the Antonio's Lorraine Hansberry Kinfolk Award, the Edgerton Foundation New Play Award, the Susan Smith Blackburn Prize, the Lawrence Hatcher Foundation Award, the Tom Thomas Award, the Lilly Award, Barry and Bernice Stavis Award, the Grist 50 Fixer, and the Princess Grace Playwriting Award. Erika's residencies and fellowships include the Toe Playwright in Residence at the Public Theater, the U.S. Water Alliance National Arts and Culture Delegate, New York Stage and Film Fellow in Residence, the New Harmony Project Writer in Residence, the Dramatists Guild Foundation Fellow, and the Lark Van Leer New Voices Fellow, and of course, productions include Shadowland at the Public Theater in 2023 and Kaladwada at the Public Theater in 2021. Erika is an 8th generation resident of New Orleans. I was about to say Los Angeles, Louisiana. So let's give her a warm welcome. Thank you for being here. Next, some years we do a reading of the play, but since this play has already had a gorgeous world premiere, and we're probably going to share a few old school style pictures of that production later during the conversation, we decided that the more productive and exciting thing would be to have a conversation about the play. And so we've gathered these artist scholars from across ATHE. Yay, woo! And they've read the play and they're going to respond to the work. So I'm going to start by introducing all of our guests here. And then they're going to share their love letters at first for the play, which is a term I borrow from Deb Margolin, who has responded for us in the past. So Lydia Fort has directed at the Signet Theater, Diversionary Theater, the Perseverance Theater, the Women's Project Theater, Women's Center Stage, and Urban Stages, the McCarter Theater You Think Festival, and the New Federal Theater, Ensemble Theater. Classical Theater of Harlem, the Free Fall Theater, the Hangar Theater, Planets Connections Festivity, where she was honored with the Best Director and Greener Planet Awards, as well as other festivals including the New Black Fest, 48 Hours in Harlem, and the Fire This Time Festival. Lydia is the co-founder and artistic director of Academia Theater Company and has penned 2 performance pieces, including Welcome to My Body and /He, which explore identity, culture, the body, and illness. She was a member of the U.S. delegation of the International Theater Institute's World Congress in China in 2011. Lydia was a Time Warner Foundation Fellow of the 2012-2014 lab at Women's Projects Theater, New York Theater Workshop Directing Fellow, Drama League Fellow, and Theater Communications Group's New Generation Future Leader grantee. Ms. Ford is a member of the Stage Directors and Choreographers Union and the League of Professional Theater Women, the International Drama Theater Education Association, and the Arts Equity 2017 cohort. Ms. Ford holds a BA from New York University and received both a certificate in arts management for the performing arts and an MFA in directing from the University of Washington. Welcome, Lydia. Thank you for being here. We'll also be hearing from Jacqueline Springfield. Jacqueline is an actor, director, and educator, and she currently serves as assistant professor of acting at Kennesaw State University. Her dialect coaching credits include the Kennedy Center, the Black Arts Institute at Stella Adler, Ensemble Studio Theater, the Alliance Theater, True Colors Theater Company, and Actors Express. And her teaching credits include the Lee Strasberg Film and Theater Institute, the American Musical and Dramatic Academy, New York Film Academy, and Brooklyn College. Jacqueline holds a Master's of Fine Arts in Acting from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro and is a certified associate instructor of Fitzmaurice voice work. And she is a proud member of the Voice and Speech Trainers Association, VASTA, Actors Equity, and SAG-AFTRA. And Jacqueline continues to work as a performer in film, television, theater, and voiceover. So you're probably way better with the mic than I am. And last, we're happy to welcome Omiyẹmi Artisia Green, who has 20 years of professional leadership and teaching experience in higher education. Trained as a director and African-American theater historian with an MFA from Virginia Commonwealth University. For 14 years, she served the Department of Theater and Performance and Program in Africana Studies as professor at William & Mary. Her work is published in Theater Continuum, the Stage Directors and Choreographers Society Journal, the August Wilson Journal, August Wilson's Pittsburgh Cycle, Critical Perspectives on the Plays, and she has forthcoming work in August Wilson in Context and Applied Theater and Racial Justice, Radical Imaginings for Just Communities. Following her facilitation of the William & Mary 22nd Martha and Carl Tack Lecture, she's been working on developing a complete historical narrative of African-American theater and Black theater pedagogy and productions offered within the Department of Theater and Performance. Her commitment to inclusive excellence, transformative student-centered teaching, and the institutionalization and operationalization of Black theater pedagogy and production earned her university-wide honors and the distinction of becoming the first Black woman to become tenured and promoted to full in theater in the 98-year history of the Department of Theater and Performance. I feel like that needs a big shout out from my alma mater. Omiyẹmi's governance in the field includes serving as president of the Black Theater Network, where she worked with the leadership to develop the network's first strategic plan. As a member of the Cadence Board of Directors, she developed and directed one of the company's cinema and film TV programs, Sightlines BLM, and co-wrote grants funded by the NEA, Challenge America, and the Virginia Commissions for the Arts and Culture Works. She currently serves as the inaugural editor-in-chief of the Black Theater Review and the VP of Professional Development for ATHE. Woo, do you sleep? Welcome to our esteemed respondents. The charge for today was to read Shadowland and respond with a short love letter to the work. And then we're going to kind of spin it out into a more organic conversation, which we will, of course, invite our audience into. So would anybody like to jump in first with their love letter?
Okay, I'd like to start. I just, here, let me turn this back. I just want to start by saying I'm trying so hard not to just fangirl out right now because I've loved and followed Erika's work for a long while. And my good friend Donnie Lynn was the dialect coach for Shadowland.
Oh, you know Dawn. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
It's going to be a lot of that, okay?
Yeah,
We're
there's
Black
going to be a
women.
lot of that.
I know you are academics, and it's been a bit stuffy over the weekend and stiff.
Let's get over that now. Let's do it. So I just wanted to say that.
Oh, my goodness. We have a lot to talk about, okay?
Yes, absolutely. So I was super excited when I was asked to do this. So in the Black community, we often show our appreciation for things with emphatic physical responses. If food is good to us, we say it makes you want to slap your mama. You, of course, would never do this. But in this saying, it is implied the food is so good it makes you think about wanting to slap your mama. There's even a slap your mama Cajun seasoning. If someone is singing well, or singing, as we might say, it makes us want to throw something, perhaps a shoe or a Bible if we're in church. I know this is news to some of you all by the way you're looking at me, but it is true.
Somebody's writing it down like
Yeah. I say all that to say this is how good Erika Dickerson Despenza's writing is. It makes me want to rip the pages out of the script or throw my laptop in appreciation. I would never do either of those things, but you get the picture. Before I read a word of the actual dialogue of Shadowland, I am immersed in the playwright's respect for, love of, and deep understanding of language and how she uses it to tell a story. Although this play must be seen to truly be appreciated, it is a delight to me as both an actor and a voice and text coach to read the introduction to the play, which details how language is to be used. By destabilizing standard English conventions in punctuation, grammar, and spelling, let me get that thing off my screen. The playwright builds a guidebook for the director and performers that give a clear sense of rhythm, pace, and intended pronunciation. It is what the playwright refers to as juke joint writing. Just as the creation of juke joints gave Black people a place to gather, dance, drink, and generally enjoy themselves without the gaze of white onlookers, so the juke joint writing in Shadowland uses language grounded in African American English with the nuances of dialect specific to New Orleans to give cultural specificity to the story being told without the judgment and expectations the limits of standard English conventions might put upon it. It is writing without walls. Although the audience is not able to read any of the notes about language when viewing the play, they are able to hear, see, and feel all the care given to language. Shadowland is a prime example of heightened text as it occurs in the work of Black playwrights, including those that the playwright lists as inspiration, Zora Neale Hurston, Ntozake Shange, and Susan Laurie Park's early work. I hope it is not an imposition to add that Dickerson Despenza's ability to listen and put the nuances of African American speech on the page rival that of August Wilson. Yes, I said it. And I love August Wilson, okay?
I'm not joking.
Oh yeah, you're gonna have a rough afternoon, let me tell you. The playwright describes the characters' voices thusly. All players have dark liquor voices characteristic of the South. Their timbres are brandied or spiced whiskey. There is so much poetry even in the way language and voice are described. It is absolutely stunning. The playwright has a particular way with personification that to my mind rivals Shakespeare. Yes, I said that. Here's an example. When Magali is watching the news and Katrina is gathering power as it reaches land, she says this to her daughter Ruth. You ain't hear that quake in the weatherman's voice? It was like something came loose in his throat when he stretched his arm across the satellite picture, like that knot of clouds had its eye on his hand and was gonna swallow him whole. He stared into that camera and told us to leave like a man on a first-name basis with death. Another extended use of personification lies in the way the specter of death literally hangs over everything. In the guise of the character of the Grand Marshal, and even the phrase etched in the mirror on the set, where the audience is able to see themselves reflected, so they know the phrase is in reference to them. I don't speak French, so I'm gonna mess this up, so you may wanna correct me on it. Souviens-toi que tu es poussière.
It's Haitian Creole.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
You're good.
Which means, remember you are dust. A reference from Genesis 3:19 when Adam and Eve were told, for dust thou art, and unto dust thou shalt return. I am struck by the playwright's focus on water in her plays. Colored Water comes to mind. That was just produced by Actors Express here not too long ago. And I was there.
Okay, sorry.
Mm-hmm. I saw it, yep. And how the introduction to the play states that, quote, water is real. So the audience may understand, see, and literally feel how the issues present are real as well. That much water in a room creates additional moisture in the air, which lends the environment a sense of physical oppression. It also calls to mind, for me, what water has meant not only to humanity, but specifically to the African diaspora, and the way it has often been used as a source of oppression and destruction for Black people. The Middle Passage, the Mississippi River used during enslavement, communities that were destroyed by purposefully being flooded, such as Oscarville, if you know Lake Lanier, just down the road here. Fire hoses used to quell Black protesters during the Civil Rights Movement, being denied regular access to clean water, as written about in Colored Water, not being allowed in swimming pools due to racial segregation, which led to the stereotype of Black people don't swim, afraid to get our hair wet. There are reasons for that. Dickerson Despenza's work is nothing short of masterful, and though it is designed to be seen, she is a playwright who writes in such a way that even reading her work immediately and completely transports you to the world she has created.
Some of my thoughts have already been said. So thank you, thank you. I know my colleagues are brilliant, and I'm not going to even try to do what they do. So I'm going to be here as a director, if that's all right. It takes everybody. Hey, and that means my crazy notes. And this is what you heard about from Jacqueline. It is like, What? So we talk about, Susan Laurie Parks in class, and if you've ever studied Black theater, she has her own. But this, I'm sorry. My hope would be that they will be studying your plays in 500 years. There is so much. Even Susan Laurie Parks can't touch that. I'm just saying, like you said, yes, I said that. The other thing that happens sometimes is that plays do well when they're read, right? A lot of Susan Laurie's work is like that. I'm sorry, I need to stop talking about her. but they have to be seen to really understand them, right? And your work, no, I get it from jump. Like the world just pops up so vividly and beautifully before your eyes. There isn't a single moment when you can't envision some version of what you're reading, some version of the changes in attitude and shape and color, and yes, how jazz happens in the voice and body. We're not just talking about what you see, we're talking about what you hear. To see that in your own head, that is a gift that not many people can do at all. I'm a northerner, come south,
Up south.
and I used to spend my summers here, right? You know, that's what we did. We drove down every summer, hang out with my grandma's, see all the family, go to the family reunion. I was transported. And in a way that is healing. Yeah, so healing. We also talk about W.E.B. Du Bois' Black theater being I can't even speak, by, for, about. Thank you. And this is a rare chance where you get to see that in action in contemporary work. I feel like you've written for me. I feel like you've written for the people I want to be talking to. I feel like you've written for my sister who I have to beg to go see a show, and probably, you know, she's seen one of my plays. Yeah? Like, I would be like dragging my niece. We need to come and learn and celebrate and witness together, to hear and to share and be with. There's also community. And if you've ever studied African film, one of the most striking features, and I always describe it this way, conversation for two people, they're in a cafe, right? Or some version of what we call a cafe. And the camera in American Western theater would be just on those two people, right? Back and forth. But what happens in African film is that they show the entire room, because that conversation isn't isolated by itself. It is with everyone who is experiencing it, even if they're not at that table. What does that say about community? This breathes community. Breathes it. I feel the neighbors even before you start talking about them. I hear them. So the other thing that I did was I had to, yes. I had to also share a couple things. And shall I say my favorite first? Sorry.
You're reminding me of the director of that show. This is so Candace. So Candace with all her paper.
So, of course, I can't find it, but it's the line that's like, you're like a Southern whore, you're like a black whore in church on Sunday morning.
Magalee's line in her spell, which is a heightened state of being, where she's describing the band playing in the olden days, and she says, men would be sweating like a French hoe in church on first Sunday. I think that's what.
That is so the line. That was like, want to get up and smack your mother to me. For me, I got to put the phone down, or I got to put the thing down. I got to walk away and take a quick sort of journey around the house and let loose. And I did that several times. I even looked at the cats. You don't know. I hope in your next time in life you'll be a human. Ruth, the daughter, says, yeah, well, blood makes grass grow. All that killing over their grass ought to be green as a bullfrog, but it ain't. Mama Magali says, well, you're supposed to be devising ways for Shadowland to grow, and you ain't so much for blood, huh? Something just comes alive about sharing seeing the world through a poet's eyes in ways that recall past, in ways that recall how we heard stories being told as children. And then at the same time, catapult us into thinking about the future, right? There's a section in the play where the daughter is looking back and what she wants to be, and we hear the mother look forward at all the possibility. And that kind of relationship of legacy is rare, right? How do we have this? How do we have both of those things? The complication of wanting to carry that forward within ourselves, for our community, but we also hear, right, and experience. Mom, I talk forever and ever, and I'll say tons of stuff, but thank you so much. Thank you, thank you.
So what did T's calming, cuts calming. So what it sounds like is that each one of us have entered our love letters from our perspectives, roles that we may play, either in the academy or in life in general. And so what I'm hearing is acting and voice, performance, I'm hearing directing. And so very much my comments are coming from the perspective of a priest whose work, um, is steeped in ritual. And so my love letter, it comes from the place of the other side of the veil. So first, thank you for this opportunity to publicly love on Erika Dickerson Despenza for the veil-piercing genius that is Shadowland. I want to begin my comments in this love fest by first showing reverence for the natural force operating within and around this ritual of remembrance that Erika has created for us, and that is the water, the beginning and source of our common humanity. So, oh mio, orieo, e payansao ya. Ba mio olokum. I give thanks for the divine and the ancestral mothers, the rivers and owners of water, carrying blood memory through you to us through Shadowland. Borrowing from the late and great Ntozake Shange's essay, My Pen is a Machete, Erika, your pen, a machete, makes clear the love you have for your city and your people, our people, because there's something about this play that implores me to see myself and to remember that the stage is Oshun's mirror. Not only is it Oshun's mirror, but it is also, like the dance floor, a point of conception. It is, as Andre de Shield told us, that theater is the way to life. Like the primordial waters of the earth, theater is a road to the emotive life of humanity, and your work reminds us of that. Sealed behind the closed doors of the seeing place, friends, family, strangers, they sit between two worlds, searching for the firstborn of darkness within lovingly crafted messages such as Shadowland. Producing this light was Erika's labor of love. Do you know, and this is a question to you, do you know what worlds, what veils of dark matter consciousness she had to traverse to serve the people? Erika's sacrifice has brought forth wisdom that nurtures, lifts up, pulls at our consciousness brings us back to our collective consciousness, all that is necessary for survival and revolutions. Artists like Erika are mothers. They lay before their work with an open consciousness, ready to receive a message that will raise up the people. They travel, they study, they observe, they receive initiations of protection and licensure. They rest because their work will take them and subsequently us into the deep mysteries of life and then return home committed to crafting their love into a ship that we can all sail. Did we choose the show or did the show choose us? Because I feel chosen. Your pen, a machete, pierces my heart and asks me to start with the ending. Ruth says it is the job of the living to keep in touch with the dead. Exemplary of theater, rooted in ritual, the forces have converged in this play to ritual, to push Ruth to this instructive observation and subsequent performance of memory, a funeral dirge for her mother, and subsequently the rebirth of her own cultural consciousness. Olokun will do that for you. Your pen, a machete, writes stage directions that are lush and vivid and transportive. Your pen, a machete, rests easily on the mojo point, the Kalunga line, the veil, the womb, Igbodu, the watery forest, separating the temporal from the spiritual, reminding us that we are all intermediaries, the crossroads between earth and heaven. In Shadowland, water is the lubricant that conjures up memory and acts of memory. The weather is, and weathering is a thing done to bring us to safety and bring us back to the truth of ourselves. We are all called to remember the power of water. It has the capacity to make us strip. Your pen, a machete, makes sacred the juke joint. For example, that which others attempt to make profane. Your pen, a machete, asks us to consider the ethical dilemmas of photojournalism about tragedy. Why is there ever a decision to be made about reporting or rescuing? Not only are we to consider this ethical dilemma, but also about photographing matters of spirit. Some things are simply too holy, too powerful, too large to be contained, reduced to a photograph. Your pen, a machete, is the thrust of the past into the present. Your pen, a machete, says, do not exhaust your magic on everyone else. Your pen, a machete, says, no one is coming to save you. Find your own icebox and float to whatever safety looks like for you. And your pen, a machete, reminds us that it means something to stay and to remember. Thank you.
So my tears are not because the words are beautiful and the critical thought effort done, but they are because I have never experienced being witnessed by Black women in the theater industry in this way. Thank you. It means, it is fortifying for me because of what I have had to travail and still travail in this industry, writing what and how I write. And to have sister scholars who are brown, because the colorism of it all also, see what I'm trying to do to honor the ancestral center of my work, to value the South and Southern Black women's stories. It is a gift to my life. So thank you.
I have a few questions, but I invited our respondents. Actually, I'd rather hear from you all and kind of continue the conversation from that perspective. So I invite you to just sort of jump in and. Okay.
I would really love to hear about the moment in your life that you decided that this was the way that is writing using your pen, your typewriter, your computer, your phone, because I can imagine that your writing, when it comes to you, it comes any and everywhere, right? So whatever the tools of Ogun are, whatever the tools of Eshu, the communicator, are, what was the moment when you decided that this was how I was going to express my gift, first and foremost for myself and my people, but also for us?
I'm going to answer that in a circular way. I was speaking in full sentences and running at 10 months old, which freaked my mother out. I had never said mama. I had never done the stumbling. I had a play aunt. My mom and all my play aunts were sharing a home. And you had the one aunt who, wasn't at the basement parties and, was the more responsible one who babysat. And her name was Vern. And she was getting ready to leave. And all my aunts and my mom are, standing around, okay, Vern, we'll see you later. And I stand and run across the room to my Aunt Vern and say, Aunt Vern, I want to go with you. And everyone is like, what? You are 10, tiny, And so I share that sometimes because I like to think that I had acquired language and was waiting to use it for when I had something to say. And because of such early language acquisition, I was a secondary education teacher, English teacher. So words have always been a part of my world in various ways. But I think about what it means to speak on purpose and to wade in language and in the story and in the place. I'm a writer who writes people and place. Some writers write ideas or theories. Some writers write people. There aren't as many writers who are writing place, particularly the South, and being produced when you are not white. And so the moment that I allowed myself to fully walk in dramatic literature happened in 2017, 2018, top of 2018, end of 2017. I was working a full-time job because, you don't live in New York without one. And I was a high-up arts administrator. I had been spending, after I left the classroom, I'd been spending my time in arts administration because I was so compelled to have a certain level of stability, financially and otherwise. And I quit a job that I was dissatisfied with, and I didn't have a backup. I've never left a job without having a job lined up. In the Black community, you're kind of taught that, you make sure you have something. And I spent 2 weeks in Jamaica crying and tarrying and figuring out, okay, is this the moment that I say yes to the call and be a writer, not on the side, not creating things over here, but really make that the center, right, of how I am doing, how I'm participating in Black liberation, how I am one of the vehicles, right? So for me, playwriting and all writing is a vehicle for political education, particularly radical political education as a tool of Black liberation. And we know that, when Black women get free, everybody gets free. Word to the Combahee River Collective, 1977, right? Because of the way that anti-Black racism and violence works in the world. And so that was the moment that I said yes, and I gave myself a year to do the side hustle thing, and I said, in a year, I will not be having any jobs that are not me writing what I am called to write. And that happened. I am a person who uses sticky notes and the notes feature on my iPhone. I wait a year before I actually write anything in terms of the script. I'm my first dramaturg, so when I know that it's a play, because that's not automatic for me, I'm a trained poet. When I know the form of the story and that I'm called to do that work, I spent a year researching, learning, praying, tarrying around the different aspects of the work before I ever write a line. And in that year's time, I'm gathering things, and at the time in New York, I was living in a shoebox, basically. So it was like right across from my bed, that wall was covered with sticky notes and articles and words, and so the names of characters will come up, or the one photograph that existed of Shadowland that was on sale on eBay. It was a postcard. They used to give these postcards out when you came to Shadowland, and there was a postcard. It was on sale for like $500,000. I could not afford that. So I, screenshot it. That was there. So I have ancestors staring at me when I rise, literally, and reminding me of that work. I started Shadowland in 2018. Started, meaning I know that this is a play. I did not write it until 2020, a first draft. So, yeah, I'm sticky notes. I don't use pencils. I believe in permanence. And even when it's a mistake or something that I no longer use, I like to be able to still see it. I like the evidence. I like the archive. I'm deep in archives. So that's my practice. I hope that answered your question.
Somebody will be doing an edited collection on all the things that you will conjure up from the places that you go, for sure.
Receive that.
I'd love to ask you, did you go with your aunt? Did you go with your aunt?
I have no idea. I don't remember this, actually. I don't remember anything under the age of 5. So all of these are stories that I am told, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I don't remember that. Like, I was also the kid. My mom tells me this. She was like, when you were 2, we used to, because my mom didn't have a car at first, very working class, poor, Chicago at that time. West Side, not South Side. I know people think all the Black people live on the South Side. There's actually a very thriving, long-standing Black community on the West Side of Chicago. And she was like, we would get on the bus, and you just want to pray with everybody all the time. You'd try to reach for the bus driver, and you look at people, can I pray for you? Can I pray with you? And I'm like, this is crazy, because at the time she told me this, my prayer life was on the struggle bus. And I was like, I don't remember this, but she was so adamant about it. She was like, yeah, you just used to walk around praying all the time. And so the things that for me are so instructive and significant for what my life is and is becoming now are the things that I don't even remember that I'm hearing, right, that are passed down from the women in my family. And there is something so spiritually beautiful about that. And at the same time, I wish I remembered these things.
It's interesting, the idea of remembering through others. And I wondered about that, whether you went or not. But if somewhere in there was what you've been talking about, a sense of connection that even at that age, you saw something that you knew you could learn, gain, connect with. If we say that when we arrive in this form, and as babies, we remember what our calling was, and then it starts to fade away. It felt to me like you were seeking. So it didn't really matter whether you went or not. I was just curious.
Now I'm gonna ask my mama. I'm gonna call her after this. Now I want to know. Did I go?
'Cause I'm sure you didn't, but
I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about the first time you encountered Ntozake Shange's work.
Tears. Okay.
Yeah, it's gonna be a rough.
I was a sophomore in high school. And I was a part of this organization called Young Chicago Authors. It is an organization that hosts the loudest teen poetry slam in the world. I know that Brave New Voices is an international poetry slam, but it's actually smaller in terms of participants. And at the time, it was called Louder Than a Bomb. I think they have like renamed the festival or whatever. But on Saturdays, there are classes with working professional artists. So Avery R. Young, Krista Franklin, Idris Goodwin, who is the artistic director of the Children's Theater in Seattle now. That was my playwriting teacher, my first playwriting teacher. And so you wake up on Saturday, you get on the bus, they give you bus cards, and you are in class at 10 a.m. And you're in class, various classes, depending on which ones you've signed up for, until about 3. And then on Tuesdays, there are open mics. Through this organization, it was going through a leadership change at the time. And there was a performance at the DuSable for Black History Month, if I remember. And the artistic director at that moment was a Black queer woman, and she wanted some of the young women who were in the program to perform for colored girls who have considered suicide when the rainbow is enough. So that was my first time reading it. She had made copies, and then she was like, you and Kiara are gonna share Lady in Brown. And I was like, man, that's my least favorite part. Like when I first read it, I was like, oh, this one, and it was through me and Kiara figuring out how we wanted to perform it, because she didn't direct us. She was like, I want y'all can sing, so I want y'all to sing some. I want y'all to play with it. And I was like, oh, I get it now. It is the moment of me finding Zaki, as Zaki is telling me about the moment she finds Toussaint. And I memorized the entire play, and honestly, I still know it by heart. I can do every monologue in that. In college, I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison. At the time, that university was 6% Black. They have way more Black students now than when I went there. I was double majoring in theater and English secondary education. I wanted to be an English teacher since I was 3 years old. I used to play school when other kids were playing house. My mom would buy me the teacher editions of thrifted school books. That was my thing. You couldn't study abroad and be in a theater program, and most of the Black and brown students, including the grad students who were in that program, were playing maids or extras. And I was like, first of all, I'm doing my thesis in South Africa, so this won't work. Also, I don't want to be an actor, and we don't have playwriting programs. So I left my private arts high school, and they were like, go to a liberal arts college. And that was kind of it, And so I started the For Colored Girls company. It was the first and only all women of the global majority theater ensemble in Madison, Wisconsin. We based it at the university. We partnered with the African American Studies Department, who had never partnered with a student organization before. Dr. Sandra Adele was our advisor. That's my girl. And this is before Thulani comes, which I was so mad. I'm like, how you gonna come after I graduate? These kids don't even know what they have here. And she's like, well, we tried to do For Colored Girls, in the 70s and in the, early 80s, and it didn't work out. So, like, I was like, well, I'm going to do it. And I'm asking if you want to be a part of this because it's happening. And we brought For Colored Girls to the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the city of Madison for the first time in 2010. And so the purpose of that theater company was to provide a space for women of the global majority to read and produce and perform plays by women of the global majority about women of the global majority for women of the global majority. And so the second year, we would do For Colored Girls every other year because namesake, right? The second year we did Rhodessa Jones's Big Butt Girls, Hard-Headed Women. We were the first people to do that piece as an ensemble piece. And then we brought Rhodessa for a semester to teach at the university. So my high school encounter with Zaki was very formative. And she became my teacher before I knew her personally. And that grew when I knew her personally until she passed. And my relationship with the family, as well as the trust, continues to this day. There is so this isn't public knowledge, so I'm going to frame it very little elusively. One of her novels is going to be adapted for Broadway, and I am the writer for that. So.
Shadowland is part of a 10 piece.
Anthology, yeah.
I wonder if you could, especially for those of you who haven't been to other sessions, talk a little bit about the inspiration and this particular project on the whole.
Okay, so the way that Spirit works, I'm not the writer that's like, oh, I don't know what I'm writing next, or that accepts commissions that's like, we want you to write about. I don't do that because I'm very divinely guided and very ancestrally guided, so I know what my projects are, even if I don't know how they're, what the writing will be. I'm not like, oh, I'm waiting on an idea, and no shade to people who work like that. It's just my ancestors are very, very, loud. They're a loud bunch. They're quite a demanding bunch, and as is my Yeye Oshun, as is divine God. And so when I was reading every book and this is in 2015, because there was like an anniversary, I think, what was that, 10-year anniversary of Katrina or something? Yeah. These books have come out by sociologists and anthropologists and historians and everybody and their mama. And I'm like, okay, I want to read what people are saying about Katrina. And so I'm reading all these books and these articles, and I'm like, wow, you're all talking about the same thing. And I'm like, nowhere in here talking about like the Black elders who had mental and physical illnesses and like how a crisis and disaster like that exacerbates those symptoms and actually, furthers the disease, and that no one was, doing work on that. Or thinking about what this man-made disaster, as well as the corrupt government, which was Black. And that's the other thing about representation that we must remember, right? Like, all skin folk and kinfolk, but also representation is never enough. Thinking about what this new landscape meant for the Black Mardi Gras Indians. And no one ever talks about how queer that tradition is, because it's still the South. I mean, it's the most liberal city in Louisiana, but it's still the South. And I'm like, y'all got on wigs and makeup and feathers and beads, and you're talking about how pretty you are. I'm the prettiest Indian here. I'm pretty. Like, it is very queer. And I'm like, no one's talking about that. And so I was like, then charting all these stories that I'm like are missing about this narrative around Katrina and New Orleans at large. And so I have my sticky notes, and I'm like, queer Mardi Gras Indian, and that's on a sticky note. Who's a leader of one of the tribes. And then I have another note like on Shadowland, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. I have another note that's like, yo, the women who are answering the phones on their emergency line. I'm writing that down. It's like, because that's care work, and it is in every city, usually women, because patriarchy and care work. I'm like, who's answering this phone? Like, y'all are dying with people. People are on the phone like, I don't want to die alone. Can you stay on the phone with me? And there are about a couple of articles where folks who have those jobs, right, were talking about that experience. And so I ended up with like 10 or 12 sticky notes that are different stories. And I'm like, oh, I think I'm supposed to do something with this. And it became, I ordered them, or they ordered me. And it became a decology. I was like, oh, this is a 10-part project. A good amount of them are plays, but not all of them. They don't follow any one family. They're very much the Katrina diaspora, bird's eye view. Shadowland was the first play in that decology. And I wasn't trying to write Shadowland. I wasn't trying to write any of these, actually. I had whole other things I was working on. And I spent a lot of time at home in New Orleans before I officially lived there full time. And the elder in my family, the grandson of the founder of Shadowland, Victor Anthony Despenza III, who was like my second cousin, once removed, generation things, but when you're Black and you got an elder, they your uncle. It's not like cousin because you're 60 something. And he would tell me about Shadowland every time I would visit, and I spent all my birthdays in New Orleans. And he'd be like, yeah, right here, we still own the land. There's houses on the land. We renting, houses. But I grew up in Shadowland, and we had, this ballroom. And we also had, my granddaddy was a part of the Cotton Club band, which was the house band. And he was telling me all these stories about him growing up in this place. And I would always say, oh, do you have any pictures? And this refrain of lost them in the flood would happen. And so I would take to the internet, because we have this Black in the Day Facebook group where New Orleans diaspora pre and post Katrina are in. And so I asked, hey, does anybody remember this place called Shadowland that was at 1921 Washington Avenue? And I got like 105 comments from people like, oh yeah, I lived across the street. Oh, we was there all the time. And I saw this performer there. I saw that performer there. And them your people. And I asked them, I'm excited, like, great, okay. Anybody got pictures? Everyone lost it in the flood. And so Shadowland became this recovery project, because how did this important edifice, cultural center, disappear from the public record? It's in the Green Book. I have that Green Book because I'm like, I know that it existed, but there was a degree that at one point I was like, Uncle Tony, I don't know, was this real? Because, you don't have anything tangible. And when I saw it in the Green Book, and on some website that like talks about the different saloons in New Orleans, I was like, oh, this is like it. And so I really wanted to talk about the loss of cultural institutions, and I moved Shadowland up into the time of Katrina. It was opened in the early 1940s, first air-conditioned hotel and jazz club for Black people in the city. And it closed by fire and disrepair in the late 80s. I bring it up in time to talk about the loss of cultural institutions, since there was such a focus on the loss of housing in most public discourses around Katrina. So. Yeah.
One of the things that I see a lot in plays is endings that are left open, right? And I get really frustrated because I was raised in theater the old school way, right? And I would say to people, I don't know what to direct if I don't know where this goes when the lights go down. Because the end of the play, or whatever's going on, needs to have some kind of direction. How do I work with an actor on a moment when they don't know what's happening, right? So what I loved is that you opened the ending with option that was so clear. Because if I chose one, That was super clear where that goes. And if I chose another, well, that's not so super clear because then it branches off into 5 other things. Oh, wow, right? Like it was just a very different approach that isn't doing what the other thing wants to do. But it's like not even in comparison, really. But you give the persons involved in creating the production a chance to see their own future and how they want to get there, right?
That's good. I'm gonna write that down.
But before you maybe address that, I had the same thought, but then I felt like, and then maybe you can clear this up for us. I was like, what? Even though I got options, I still feel like she's telling us this is the one you need to choose. Even though you have options, it still feels like, but I would go in this direction.
And I had the same thought because that's why I said that there's other roads. Because in the other option, I was
I
like,
need y'all to say what the options are because I'm gonna be real. I do not remember. So I'm sitting here like,
Okay,
yeah,
okay,
they're gonna
I got
say.
it.
I'm like,
I got it.
I don't know
So-
what it says.
So Ruth, at the end, it's the property
The property sale.
property sale agreement.
Okay.
The property sale agreement either goes with Ruth or it can just go away on the water, right? However, the litany, I kept saying, but no, we just went through this ritual. It is really clear. Her mama said, right, in so many words, I'm paraphrasing because she says it so much more belief. I will not be moved. Like, you're not going to take my property. I ain't giving it up. Her mama told her. I cannot see her. I cannot see Ruth at this point. I cannot see her doing it.
And by doing
It's-
it, you mean taking the property sale agreement?
Taking the property sale agreement and selling the property. The property is what is like at the center of this. And I just cannot see Ruth. I can't see her doing it.
it became that question of what we don't talk about so much as the second generation after Great Migration, right?
Yeah.
That all that history that got lost because our parents didn't share
Yes.
the dark times, I'll just say.
Mm-hmm.
And how that leaves one ungrounded. Like you have to know, they did this study, whatever, and it's funny. I actually know the people who did the study, I met them later. But they did this study that was like the mental health of people who knew their history, even if it was tragic,
Yes.
was much stronger than those who knew nothing at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I thought about like all of the, children whose parents went north and who knew nothing. What is that? And so Shadowland, like I said, right, it's healing. So I said to myself, okay, so if it's choosing the other one, and we just went through this whole ritual, and
What's the other one for you? I want to be clear about.
sure, okay, so sending it away is like I'm letting that go. I'm staying, yes, and I'm gonna stay for whatever that means.
Yes.
Right? The keeping it meant I'm now liberated, perhaps is one way of looking at that, to be able to craft my own. Yes. And like you, I was like, but then why did we go through all that? Well, actually, if we went through, okay, that's what I meant about like other options start to come forward. So that this or this can mean many different things. It can mean I am going to move forward and make sure that, my cousin gets this land, or that's how I'm gonna sell it, or whatever. I mean, but there was options in both ways to honor what had just passed. Yeah, Omiyẹmi's like, no, I don't think
We're
so.
gonna put that out there for you because this.
I'm like, okay, this sounds
definitely
great to
like-
me. Is there a question? I don't know.
I know which one I would direct.
So the director of Shadowland, who also directed Colored Water, my best friend, sister, Mirror, Candace and I fought about this ending. So the ending you have is actually because of Candace and her brilliance as a director and as a mirror and someone who understands my brain and not just what's like my writing, which is why I work with her over and over again. And we always be like, Dawn, you free? Because we only work with you, So Dawn worked on the dialect coaching for. You did Color Water too, right? Oh, Chris did Color Water. We were so sad. I mean, no offense, but like, it's okay. You'll do Audubon. We'll figure it out. Um, this might be draft 30 of Shadowland, which was the press copy. In previous drafts, it was she takes the paper, the property sale agreement, Ruth, and she's like waving it that she was getting attention from the helicopter that way. And Candace was like, I wonder how we can open this up. And I talked about, because she knows I'm not your happy ending playwright, because that is just not how life goes. But I was like, I'm not the one that wants to totally give you the answer ever, because I want you to do some work, and also to have options directorially. And so I was really interested in like, okay, what are the meanings that are possible? And so we ended up talking, and I went with this one because for me, taking the property sale agreement doesn't necessarily mean she's going to sell, right? If she wants to take it to, keep the evidence and talk to Mr. Anderson, who's the person who's scouting property, and just be like, hey, we're not gonna do this for legal reasons and stuff, to be able to have the agreement that they never actually gave back. It could be that, it could also be, this is the only evidence we have of the fact that we own this property because everything is lost in the flood, right? All they have, because they weren't supposed to be in Shadowland, okay? To just give you the context, Ruth was on her way to the Superdome, shelter of last resort. Her husband, Ernest, and her only child, her daughter, Davis, were already there. She had to pick up her stubborn mother, Magali, who didn't want to even go to the Superdome. She was like, I'll write it out of my house, because that's what we do in New Orleans. Also, I'm like 80. Like, I do what I want, And so she's like, this is different, Mama. She goes to pick her mama up. Her mama's like, well, I left my purse at Shadowland the other day. I got to have my pocketbook, okay? And that is a thing for Black elder women. And Shadowland is really, in real life, like 2 minutes from the Superdome in a car, And she's like, well, just go, buy and get it. We get in Shadowland, and Mama is wandering and, dallying, and Ruth is trying to, okay, we gotta go. Let me just grab a couple things, that we need from here, and meet Ernest, Davis, they already got a spot. And then the hurricane, lands, and so they're stuck in Shadowland. So for me, taking the paper means I need to prove that we even own this, because the reality of New Orleans and places like it, right, is that Black people who own land and homes, particularly heirs property, is not then recognized legally. And so families who have owned land and homes for generations are now losing it to spectators, right? Speculators, excuse me. And the government is doing nothing because they want a certain population out anyway. So for me, taking the paper means any number of those things. Letting it sail over the water, and the body is in the water, actually covered by a white cloth, can mean the honoring, right? That I am keeping this, or Mother, I get it, right? In that way as well. So for me, it's intentionally that way. I may have a feeling about an option, but I don't think I do anymore. I think, world premiere is always world premiere, so you're figuring things out.
So how I would amplify this in a classroom, the water forgets nothing. There's literature on this, right? And also, for those of us who are teaching Black theater, maybe not necessarily an African American theater course, because Dominique Taylor, who's also at this conference, succinctly told us there's a difference and the work of Paul Carter Harrison, who I've been channeling over the past couple of days for those of you who have been in sessions with me, also told us that there is a difference. But I'm going to cite Dominique Taylor here, and he tells us in Don't Call African American Theater Black Theater, it's like calling a dog a cat. The work ends with possibility. So this is an exemplar text to teach if you are teaching a Black theater course, because of how she so geniusly structures it according to the aesthetic principles of the work.
What she said. So all of my work is accompanied by community work and or direct action, as well as I have this deep desire to, I don't want to say work in museums because I am deeply disinvested in white institutions and power structures, but there is something very museum-esque about my work and the worlds that I create. And so every production of mine is accompanied by an exhibition that I curate. Part of that is for dramaturgical reasons, because the worlds that I am creating also actually exist, right? And so there is some information I want the audience to be able to have, like the timeline of the storm and the flood and responses. Or with Colored Water, it was the timeline of the Flint water crisis and all of the lawsuits and things like that, right? So there's this timeline. The exhibition was called Salt Rimmed Wound for Shadowland. And the photos of that my Uncle Tony took while he was stuck on a parking garage uptown during Katrina. If you were in the other session, you heard this, but briefly, he was stuck for like 5 days before he swam. He's a Vietnam vet, to the nearest Walgreens, broke in, only took a camera, and took pictures, came back, to the parking garage, took pictures as he waited for rescue, as the helicopter came, as the helicopter dropped him on the bridge, as they went from the bridge to the shelter, and I'm the only person who has those photos. He passed away in April of 2020. And so I wanted to honor him and the fact that he has then, given me the go-ahead to be the family historian and the keeper, right, of this sacred knowledge and things and these stories. And the exhibition included all of his photos. And in the center of the exhibition, if you recall the photos that surfaced after Katrina and the talk about loss of homes, you see the concrete slab and like the house is missing. And so I built this concrete slab, and it had one stair, and the back was framed, the back and sides were framed by all of the names of people who did not survive the storm or the flood or died subsequently, right after both of those things, as a result of health complications that were caused by like the formaldehyde in the trailers, or things that exacerbated illnesses that they already had. And we had white taper candles, we had water, we had earth, because these are the elements you put on an ancestral altar, right? Your foundation. And there's a picture of my Uncle Tony sitting by Lake Pontchartrain, literally sitting on the water. You just see him on a slab of concrete, and the lake is just filling the photo. And there's fake grass underneath the slab. And it was an altar space, right, honoring this very specific symbol, right, motif of that time, and these names of people who, some of which have never been spoken or even known. We had to really dig and go into some like state archives to find the running list. And I know that it's still incomplete, but there were over 500 names on that. And we invited audience members and passerbys to add to the altar. So some people left coins or, okra or a photo of their loved one. And it was open to just this time of loss that we're even still in. Like folks that you've lost from COVID, you can add them here, because this is all a part of the same thing, government failure, right? Man-made disaster. It's a circle. And so it was one of my favorite exhibitions that I've curated. And then we had some poems, like one by Lucille Clifton that she wrote about Katrina, different things like that. So Dawn is my dialect coach for everything. She's amazing. Don't be trying to steal her because she needs to be available for my work. So just understand that if you ask her for something and it's a conflict, I'm gonna have a problem. But so Don also worked on the audio play. Shadowland was an audio play, not intentionally. Colored Water got pushed back because of COVID, and the artistic director at the theater I was working at was like, my theater needs content. I think Shadowland would be great as an audio play. What do you think? And I'm like, that's not what I wrote it for, and what do I get out of that? And he was like, well, I'll produce it after Colored Water if you let me do it as an audio play. And I was like, that's more like it. So we did it as an audio play. My Oshun sister and New Orleans lady, Sonny Patterson, played the role of the griot. So the Grand Marshal was actually a griot in the audio version. And so that's the digital space that Dawn is speaking about. I am a living altar, and I'm very much a horse. For those of you who are not conjure specifically hoodoo familiar, a horse is a person the spirit rides. Ancestors will ride you because you're available and you're willing and you have the gift. So I often even hear my ancestors like, no, I want my story. No, it's my turn. Like arguing about whose story is next because you're available. And so you have to create boundaries and things like that. Otherwise you're getting no sleep. But I think because I am an altar and because it's just so deeply in my life practice. So Hoodoo, Ifa, they are not my religions, they are my life systems, right? So there's no division for me in these different ways that, we do in the West. So it's natural for me to say, hey, there's an ancestral altar in all of my rehearsal rooms. And, because I work with someone who understands my brain and who is also my sister, friend, mirror, right? Candace is like, yeah. And we make sure we set parameters. We're talking about your elevated and benevolent ancestor. Don't be bringing the people who crazy up in here, right? And we also have an altar if there is another deity or spirit that is involved in the work. There's an altar for them too. They're separate altar because that's how we do. Ancestral altar is always first, but Colored Water, there is an altar for Yemoja, right? There is an altar in Shadowland's rehearsal room for Baron Samedi, right? We're talking Haitian voodoo specifically, and the head of the family of death, right? The oldest person in the cemetery is the Baron Samedi of that cemetery. And so when I go to a cemetery because I know I'm doing this play, I find the oldest person buried there, and I pour libation for that person, and I pray to and for that person, even if I don't know them. Now, of course, I'm going to go to all the cemeteries in New Orleans where my people are buried and go find the oldest person in my lineage whose grave I can find because that is my family's Baron Samedi, right, in this place, and do the same thing. So there's a lot of groundwork personally that before I go into the room, usually with actors that I may not have worked with before, and Black women who be like, I ain't never did this in a room, or I'm not really sure how to be my Black self again because I'm so used to not being, or I do Jesus, and I ain't never really did nothing else. It's an invitation. It's not a requirement, but we open up every rehearsal day with, there's a book called Ancestor Said, by a ethnically Yoruba and Ifa practitioner that she was just writing these affirmations and notes that she was hearing. So every day we would they're dated. So whatever day it is, it's April 23rd. We're opening the book for the April 23rd and we read what Ancestor said for that day. We start our days like that. And so the more that we're just in the flow of practices, the more open and interested we saw cast and creative team, because if you in the room, in whatever capacity you in the room, so you're participating in some capacity. And so they got into it. Somebody stole my Ancestors Said book, actually, because I never got that back. But, it's for me, I forget that I'm in this institution. I don't forget because I'm like, I know I make you all look like you do your mission for real. So I know what I bring, which is why I get what I want, right? Because I'm aware of who I am in this space. But I forget the space, meaning this isn't the public theater. This is a Black woman's workroom. This is an ancestor. This is an altar. How are we conjuring here? If this is our river, if this is our clearing, right? Toni Morrison, Beloved, New Orleans, Congo Square. If this is our clearing, our space on a Sunday, right? What do we do with it? How do we move in it? And my director is generally always a Black woman, and everybody is colored in my room. So like, and by that I mean literally, like we're all brown, Black women, femmes, and femme of center non-binary people generally. Whole creative team, from makeup and hair to assisted stage manager, like we are all that. And so it is very much this space, this clearing is ours. And so I think that's how I see it, by making sure I'm doing my personal work. I have a pamphlet that I give out now because I always get the questions, how do I take care of myself while doing this work? Because we have those conversations, especially the pieces that have very specific spiritual references and deities. And so, like, we had a Babalawo in Colored Water because Yemoja came up in that. We made sure that they had a pamphlet that was like, here's a white bath. Let's talk about spiritual baths. Let's talk about practices. Like, I know you have your actor practices of taking off a character, but spiritually, like, there is an added step there. So we take care of each other in those ways, and I'm very intentional about that and work with people who are intentional about that. Which also, like, first just starts with me doing my work outside and before all of that. So, I hope that answered it, I think.
Thank you. That was an awesome question. And I think kind of a beautiful closing note, because I think we're basically at time. Which went really, really fast. I think we could go on forever, and we probably, I don't know if we have anyone in the room behind us, so I invite folks after, if you want to come up and just take a look at some of the production stills from the recent production at the Public Theater, or love on Erika for this amazing
You have
work.
a question that you don't want to ask in front of everybody. It's okay.
Any of the above, and let's take a moment to thank our panelists. Thank